What's going on, everyone? In this video, we'll be talking about the SAT November and the best tips and tricks that you guys can use to get 1600 on this upcoming SAT exam. SAT November is the second to last SAT of this season, this cycle, right? After this to December SAT, and then this year is over, right? And then we got March SAT and so on. So the question is, with these last two SATs, how will things be going? What tips and tricks, are still relevant? What should you keep in mind as you head into these final two SATs? And what you should do from here on out. So the first things first, as we all know, there's 4 sections of the SAT, and to get the best possible score, you need to know tips and tricks for every single section. So starting off with what I think is one of the easiest sections, and that is the SAT writing section. Now, let me be clear. I used to get a 30 out of 44 on this, but now, through tips and tricks and through the stuff that I'm about to share with you guys, I learned how to get, and on average, like a 41 to 42 out of 44, which is such a great score in the writing section because obviously, 1, you're only getting 2 or 1 question wrong, and 2, that sets you up for such a big cushion on the overall SAT reading exam, because the comprehension part a lot of people mess up on. So if you have a good writing score and like a okay comprehension score, you can still maybe crack that 700 range, which is phenomenal when it comes to SAT reading. So the best tip I can give you all when it comes to SAT reading is, in fact, and should be a no-brainer, that is to learn the grammar rules. Okay, learning grammar rules is probably the biggest thing you can do to maximize your score on the SAT writing section, because at the end of the day, they're quizzing you on how well you understand grammar, how well you're able to formulate sentences, right? So if you do not understand when to use a semicolon, when to use a colon, when to use an em dash, or how they work, you should know that a semicolon joins 2 independent clauses. You should know a colon is preceded by an independent clause and succeeded by a dependent clause, right? Hopefully I got that right. Stuff like that you need to keep in mind, because if you understand all that material, all those rules, you're going to find yourself being able to answer so many of the SAT writing questions within seconds. And mind you, you only have 35 minutes for 44 questions. And the SAT writing exam is the only section of the SAT where they give you less time for the number of questions. So it's like usually you get like 1 minute to more than a minute for every question on all the other sections. But for the writing section, you get less than a minute per question. That's the only one that's like that. So you need to be able to finish these questions in under a minute, preferably like 10, 20 seconds, 20 seconds to the max. And the only way you're able to do this, guys, is, like I said, if you are able to understand the grammar rules. And there's so many guides. There's like a Princeton guide. If you just go on Google and search for SAT writing grammar rules, you get all the rules you need to know and you need to master to ultimately get that SAT writing section and high score on that. Well, there's definitely a fly that just flew in the camera. And now moving on to the SAT reading section. Okay, the SAT reading section / comprehension section is obviously like the hardest part of the SAT, in my personal opinion. For all the readers out there, like my sister, you guys probably love the SAT reading part. So how exactly can you improve your reading score, right? There's 52 questions if I'm correct, and you have 65 minutes. And with the passages as well, you probably only have like a minute or less per question, right? So this boils down to how well you understand the passage, right? And the better you understand the passage on your first read, the higher the chance that you're gonna end up with a really good score, right? Because what happens is when you understand the passage really well on your first read, you're not gonna find yourself having to, go back to the passage and reread a bunch of paragraphs just to understand one question, answer one question, right? Because the more you reread, the more time you're wasting. The more time you're wasting, the less time you have for the other passages, right? If you're spending like 20 minutes on the science passage, then the history passage, which is like historically the hardest passage, you're gonna get destroyed on, right? And you can't have that happen, right? You don't want to get destroyed on any SAT reading passage. Otherwise, you're gonna end up with like a 100 score. That sucks. So what you have to do is you gotta make sure you understand the passage as much as possible the first time you read it. Now, I'm not saying never go back and reread. Obviously, you're gonna find yourself having to go back and reread, but the idea is you wanna minimize that as fast as possible, as much as possible. And the best way to do that is by annotating. You see, by annotating, you are, first of all, forcing your brain to focus on the SAT reading passage. You're underlining important details, you're highlighting important details, circling important details, and you're able to draw connections as you read. And by drawing these connections, you're forcing yourself to be like, oh shoot, this is why dolphins are dying. This is why Abraham Lincoln was the best president of the United States projectively. By making those connections, you're understanding the passage, and that's why I love annotating. And I found myself struggling on the SAT reading section. I was struggling. I'll get 20 questions wrong. But once I started annotating, things started clearing up. I started asking myself questions as I read. I forced myself to love the passage, right? Even though I don't like reading. But that's what you got to do. And when you annotate, you find that being so much easier, and you're able to kind of like enjoy the reading passage just a little bit, at least the story's remotely interesting. Now moving on to the SAT math non-calc section. This is my favorite section. Also probably the section that got me the most favors on YouTube, right? This is the section where you can like just impress everyone, right? You can impress yourself, impress your friends, your teachers, your tutors, impress the College Board test creators. The non-calc section is where you are able to finish a 25-minute section in literally 5 minutes if you know all the SAT math tips and tricks that are required for this section of the SAT. And I cover all of them as well as the calculator tricks in my SAT math course, so be sure to check that link in the description below. But with the SAT non-calc, you really just have to understand all the patterns in the on that section, as well as the tips and the tricks. And by understanding all of this, you'll be able to answer every single question like much faster than the average human. And if you're doing better than the average human in the SAT, you're looking at least a 1400. There's a couple of tricks I can give you guys right now, right? Negative b over a, understanding how to scale linear equations, understanding what a zero is, what a root is, what a solution is, the fact that they all mean the same thing when it comes to quadratics. Like these things I just said in the past like 20 seconds, if they flew over your head and you're like, what did he just say? Then most likely you're not ready enough for the SAT math non-calc section, which is why you should definitely go practice, check out my course, use Khan Academy, and start relearning the stuff that I just said, or learning for the first time the stuff I just said, because these are the tricks that will turn a 1 minute question into literally like 5 seconds. Right? Like you blink, the question's done. And now moving on to the last section, that is the SAT math calculator section. Okay, the calculator section is not talked about enough, and in fact it's not the hardest section, but it's definitely a section that students might get a couple of questions wrong, and those couple of questions will differentiate you from getting an 800 on the SAT math and like 760 or 720, right? So you want to make sure you maximize the SAT calc section, and the best way to do that is by knowing the calculator like the back of your hand, and understanding that you most likely will not need the calculator for like more than 3/4 of the SAT math calculator questions, because the questions are designed so you can do a lot of them mentally by hand, by writing like a quick couple lines of math. That's how the questions are designed. Certain questions you will need a calculator for, but most of them you will not. Usually the last 6 questions on the calculator section require a calculator. That too only like 4 of the 6, but the rest really don't that much, right? And for example, if you don't own the calculator like by the back of your hand, then you won't be able to answer these questions in the fastest way possible. And here's a quick trick to whether you know your calculator by the back of your hand. First of all, you guys should be all using TI-84s. So if I ask you, how do you clear a calculator, right? If you do not know how to do that off the top of your head, you're not ready enough, right? Second plus 712, guys. Write that in your brain. Second plus 712, that is how you clear a TI-84 calculator, right? Stuff like that. If you don't know that, like off the dome, then there's a problem, right? So you have to practice using your SAT math calculator again and again and again, and that's how you're going to be able to match the SAT calculator section, right? And then ultimately you'll be able to get a high SAT math score by checking out my course, and as well as practicing problems on your own time. And when it comes to SAT reading and writing, using Khan Academy, reading on your free time, annotating, learning grammar rules, that's how you can maximize the score in the SAT reading section. That's how you're going to get a super like 1600 on the SAT November exam. So thank you all for watching. Get that perfect score. Peace.